Good morning, guys. Today we're going to talk about the origins of humans. And what we're going to look at is the scientific origins, not the biblical origins. That's not to say that we're making a judgment over which one is correct. But for our purposes, we're looking at how human beings evolved from an earlier form to modern man. The first age we're going to look at is called the Paleolithic age. Paleo means old, while lithic comes from a Latin word that means rock or stone. So Paleolithic literally means the old Stone Age. And it's given that name because it's a time period where stone tools were used. This time period, it's got a real rough time period. Somewhere between 2,500,000 BCE and the year 10,000 BCE. Sometimes you'll see that cutoff be 8,500 in that era. When you're talking about this wide of a time period, the dates can vary widely. But for our purposes, 2,500,000 BCE, that's before the Common Era, it's a negative number before the year zero, to 10,000 BCE, 10,000 years before the year zero. What's significant about these people is we know they made tools. And the tools were made with stone or bone or whatever they could find to develop. Now, what do we mean by tools when we're talking about this stuff? Anthropologists. An anthropologist is somebody that studies ancient peoples. And archaeologists are people that study ancient stuff, ancient artifacts. An artifact is just anything that's left over. So anthropologists and archaeologists know about this ability to make tools because we found the tools. We found things that could be used. And for our purposes, a tool is anything you use to complete a job. So technically speaking, if you're out planting crops and you have a stick and you stick it in the ground to make a hole, that stick is a tool at this point. The tools at this point were very, very simple. They were hammering tools, drilling tools. A lot of times we know that they would take bones and develop very primitive drills for drilling into wood. Necklaces were made. A lot of hunting tools were made. These people in the Paleolithic age, and I'm using the term people very, very loosely because a lot of scientists would not call these humans yet. But these hominids, hominid is someone that walks on two legs, stands upright and walks on two legs. They were hunters and gatherers. They lived in small bands, not large nations, small bands of 20 to 30 human beings. And the men tended to hunt while the women tended to gather. And they were equally important. You had to hunt and gather in order to survive. As a result, they were also nomads. These are nomadic people. If you don't know what a nomad is, it's someone who moves from place to place in search of food. So these two-legged primates that include all modern humans also included something called Australopithecus. And we didn't know about this for a long time. But Australopithecus was discovered by a guy named Leakey in Africa. And we think they lived somewhere between 4 million BCE and 1 million BCE. They were hominids in that they walked upright. They had an opposable thumb at this time period. They used tools. They were more advanced than an average animal. The most famous of these was the very first one found that we just call Lucy. And when the Leakeys found it, they kind of changed history. I'll put a picture up here of what we think Lucy looked like, and you can judge for yourself whether this was an ancestor to human beings or a great ape. The second stage, or the second part of the human development, is also in the Paleolithic period. And it was a primitive hominid by the name of Homo habilis, Habilis. Homo habilis, homo means man or person, and habilis means handy or works with their hands. So Homo habilis literally means handyman or man of skills. The artifacts of this, along bones, tools, were found mostly in East Africa, in what's today Ethiopia. So up in the northeastern part of Africa, kind of down by the Red Sea area. We know they created stone tools because we found a great deal of these stone tools. We also know that Homo habilis was a little more advanced than Australopithecus because we found artwork by him. We found that during this time period, these people took shelter in caves, and they left pretty elaborate cave paintings behind. I'll put some up here for you to see what they look like. But this, to me, is an ancestor to human beings. This, to me, is the first humans, because there's something vastly different when you get to art from animals. I've got some really smart dogs and some really smart horses, but they ain't never made a picture for me. So Homo habilis seems to be a lot more advanced. The next hominid on the evolutionary scale, whether it be the third if you count Australopithecus, but I would say it's definitely the second stage of development, is Homo erectus. Now again, Homo means mankind, man or person, and erectus means to stand upright, to stand erect, okay? So Homo erectus literally means upright human being or man standing erect. This was also a bipedal person. So while it was a hominid that was capable of using both legs, this time it's not just capable, it seems to almost exclusively walk on two legs, almost exclusively be a biped. If you want to remember that, bi means two and ped is foot. That's why when you ride your bicycle, you use your feet on pedals. It's why foot doctors are called podiatrists. So bipod is somebody that has two legs and uses two legs. They also had much more varied tools, much more advanced tools. Spearheads, we might call them arrowheads, but they're usually spearheads that they would use to hunt animals. They were the first people or first hominids to use fire, we believe. Somewhere around 500,000 BCE, they developed fire. And that's going to be one of the most important tools ever developed. We also know, because we found artifacts and bones around the world, that they're the first hominid to leave Africa and migrate into Europe and Asia. So there's a lot of questions about how mankind developed. How did humans become modern human beings? There's two different theories on the development or migration of mankind. The first is called the radiation theory, and this is by far the most popular view today, and that's that we're all Africans under the skin. What that means is mankind developed first in Africa, and then they radiated out from there. They started there and they moved into the Middle East, into Europe, into Asia from there. And that's why we see Australopithecus just in Africa, and then we see Homo erectus mostly in Africa. And as they move through, Homo habilis mostly in Africa. But as they move through, we start seeing them, the remnants developing in Europe, in the Middle East, in Asia. This would suggest that the cradle lands for mankind's development is Africa. What we sometimes call mitochondrial Eve is from Africa. We can all trace our lineage back to one person in Africa a long, long time ago. The other version is what we call parallel evolution theory. And some scientists believe that mankind evolved separately in a bunch of different places around the world. So instead of starting in Africa and going out, this thought is that one group of humans evolved in Africa, one group evolved in Europe, one group evolved in Asia, and then they all met through migration, and they kind of commingled from there. Let's talk about how we got to modern man. The group I want to talk to you now about are called Homo sapiens. Again, Homo means man or mankind. Sapiens means wise. So this literally means wise man or wise human being. And Homo sapiens, at least in the version we're going to look at here, is somewhere between 200,000 BCE and 10,000 BCE. There's two groups I want to talk about. The first two types of Homo sapiens were two subgroups called Neanderthal and Cromagnon. Now, Neanderthal lived from about 200,000 BCE to 30,000 BCE. That's a long, long time period. Cromagnon was a much shorter time period, about 40,000 BCE through to about 10,000 BCE. So if you look at that, there's about 20,000 years in there where they were together, okay? Let's talk about Neanderthal. Neanderthal bones were first found in the Neander Valley in Germany in 1856. And I would say Neanderthal is a modern man because they did a bunch of stuff that only modern man does. First off, they were the first humans to bury their dead. Now, anthropologists tell us that this means they had religion, that the fact that they honored the body of the dead and they buried it to protect it from scavengers means that they believed in an afterlife. And that's a pretty common belief. There are others, I've had students tell me maybe the bodies just stink. That's a possibility too. Remember, historians, anthropologists, archaeologists, we're detectives. We're pulling all this information together and we're making a hypothesis, a logical deduction over this. The Neanderthal also clothed themselves. They're the first hominid, the first human beings to clothe themselves, to use animal skins. That's a pretty advanced concept. That's something a lot more advanced than what we would think of as cavemen. Although in reality, these were cavemen. Neanderthal did live in caves, or if they lived in tents, they were very, very simple tents. Nothing as advanced as what we would imagine today. Neanderthal is going to be mostly in Europe. They're going to stretch from Spain all the way up into a little bit in the British Isles, all the way over into the steppe regions of Eastern Europe and Western Asia. Incredibly advanced. Cromagnon is another part of Homo sapiens. In fact, this subspecies is called Homo sapiens sapien, which just means wise man. And we know that Cromagnon, or Cro-Magnon as we usually say in America, Cro-Magnon is going to supplant Neanderthal by about 30,000 BCE. Neanderthal dies out. There's none left. Cro-Magnon continues to exist. Why does Homo sapiens survive while Neanderthal doesn't? Well, there's a lot of questions about this, and we'll never really know. But it could be that the voice box was in a different place. Some people believe that, which allowed Homo sapiens sapien, Cromagnon, to communicate better than Neanderthal might have. The brain cage is a little different, although honestly it doesn't appear that they were any smarter than Neanderthal. They just may have been developmentally more capable of surviving than their cousins had been. Homo sapiens sapien is going to really take over Europe and spread out, and we know that genetically we are very, very similar to these people. In fact, there's a lot of evidence that modern man did interbreed with Cromagnon, that possibly we are Cromagnon, and we know that we carry the genetic part of it. With the advent of Homo sapien, we come to the Neolithic age. Neo means new, lithic means rock or stone. So Neolithic is the new Stone Age. This is somewhere between 10,000 BCE and 4,000 BCE, a much shorter time period. And this is when we were making a really important shift. In fact, we call this the Neolithic Revolution, or the agricultural revolution. Now I want to talk to you about what a revolution is. Because in our minds, revolution sometimes means a war, and it can. But all revolution really means is a significant change. Whether it's the revolution of the earth, or an information revolution, or an industrial revolution, or the American Revolution, it's a time period of significant change. And the Neolithic Revolution happened somewhere between 8,000 and 5,000 BCE, depending on where you are in the world. In the Middle East, somewhere around 8,000 BCE, but in Southeast Asia, not until 5,000 BCE. Here in the Americas, somewhere around 6,500 BCE. But it's this time period when we shifted from hunting and gathering to settled agriculture. So if you ever see the question, what is the Neolithic Revolution? The way you remember it is we stopped hunting and gathering and we started farming and ranching. This is going to be super important because the development of agriculture and the development of pastoralism, of raising animals, is going to allow mankind for the first time in history to stay in one place. We don't have to be nomads anymore. We can build cities. And one of the ways we did this is through slash and burn agriculture. Now I know we have this image of the Indians and primitive people as being so good for the environment, but in fact they weren't. Slash and burn agriculture was incredibly violent to the environment. What they would do, because they didn't have fancy tools, they didn't have chainsaws, they didn't even have axes really, they had stone tools. So they would go out in the forest and they would take a bone saw, which is basically a sharpened jawbone off a large animal, and they would go around the tree and use it as a draw knife and draw the bark off all the way around the tree. This would have the effect of eventually killing the tree, and the tree would then shed its leaves, shed its branches, and they would gather all that and burn it in order to clear the land. Slash and burn agriculture cleared land dramatically. It left a fertile ground, but it did greatly damage our environment. This is something we had to do to have the Neolithic Revolution, and we know it happened. We know it happened at places like Jarmo in northern Iraq, where wheat was grown on a large scale as early as 9,000 BCE. So what did these early communities look like, these early cities? They were definitely cities, but they were not talking New York City. We're talking small cities. One of the largest ones is at a place called in what's today Turkey. It had about 6,000 inhabitants in it, as early as 8,000 BCE. So think about what you would have to have in order to have 6,000 people living somewhere. You'd have to have sufficient water. You'd have to have a way to take care of waste. You'd have to have sufficient food. You'd have to have security. All these things have to happen. So what did this particular city, Catalhayuk, have in it? Well, we know they had 12 different cultivated crops. Most of those are wheat type crops. Wheat is one of the first things man will ever domesticate as far as a crop goes. It's easy to grow. It can be preserved very easily. It's got a high source of nutrients. If you can somehow manage to tame wheat and grow it, you can feed a vast population. It also had division of labor. Division of labor just means jobs. For the first time ever, because we weren't dependent on hunting and gathering, we could specialize. And you could have people that are really good at farming, farm. People that are really good at ranching, raise animals, called pastoralization. You could have people that are really good at making barrels. They're called coopers, build those. People that could make clothes would build those. And through the barter system, you trade what you were good at for whatever you were not good at. Division of labor is essential for all civilizations. We know that they engaged in trade with other places because we find relics, artifacts in the in the record that don't come from Turkey. There are things that couldn't have come from Turkey because it's not available there. It's only available in other places. So there's extensive trade happening. We know they had organized religion because there's temples there. And we know they had a small military because you couldn't exist at this time period with 6,000 people without having some way to protect it. I'll put some pictures up here of what Catalhayuk looked like, and it's a pretty good example of what an advanced city would have been. I want to talk to you about a term, civilization. You may have been called uncivilized before. My mother used to call me and my sisters uncivilized all the time because we kind of act like barbarians. But that's not really what the word means. To be civilized means to have cities. Civilization is city life. And there are 5 things that you have to have a city. And we've talked about some of these already, but we're going to put them all together right here. You must know this. This ends up on tests all the time, and I can guarantee you'll see this on a test pretty soon. The 5 characteristics of civilizations are advanced cities. That means you got to have a large population center with a large population center that is centered in one area. Specialization. That means you have to have jobs. Complex institutions. An institution could be a government, it could be a religion, but you can't exist as a civilization if you don't have an established government of some type, and that government could just be the guy with the biggest stick wins. You got to have some kind of a religion. You have to have some kind of record keeping, because how are you going to keep a calendar and know when to plant your crops so your civilization can survive if you can't keep records? And finally, you have to have some kind of an advanced technology. Now that doesn't mean computers. That means more advanced than a stick that you push in the ground to plant seeds. You have to have something to advance your civilization.